Universe Mode has been the foundation of this YouTube channel for nearly 4 years now, spanning over the course of 4 games, 300 episodes, and 178 hours of published material. If you were to watch the entire series non-stop from start to finish, it would take you about a week, assuming that you don't need any food, sleep, or a bathroom. Currently, Universe Mode comprises roughly 50% of my content, and while that percentage will slowly decrease with time, it's safe to say that Universe Mode isn't going anywhere anytime soon. It goes without saying that I've put a lot of effort into this series, so of course I'd like you to believe it's the greatest thing in the history of YouTube. However, unless your name is Tye Dillinger, nothing is perfect, so to say that my passion project contains its fair share of flaws would be a massive understatement. Greatness comes from knowledge, and knowledge comes from experience, which is something that I lacked when I started this channel years ago. As a result, there are many moments or storylines that, looking back on them, were absolute garbage. And while I'm not the kind of person who regrets or tries to hide things, that doesn't mean that I wouldn't try to quietly sweep them under the rug or maliciously beat them over the head with a shovel. So today on Behind the Universe, I present you with 4 things we could pretend never happened. Because the top 5 concept is about as overexposed and overrated as Roman Reigns. The Shield is quite possibly the most dominant faction in the history of Universe Mode. But did you know that at one point there were plans to have a 4th Shield member? Yes, I know The Undertaker eventually filled that role, and while that decision itself wasn't the greatest choice either, he wasn't the original superstar considered. In fact, the person considered for the position was a female. That's right, the Shield's domination was going to extend into the Divas division. But who, you may ask, could have possibly been considered to join such an intense group? Well, yeah. But that's not even the worst of it. So as you see, the idea was, my plan was to, Fortunately, Oksana's video game career ended with WWE 2K14, so the storyline had to be scrapped, but imagine where we'd be if that wasn't the case. WWE 2K14's booking mainly consisted of plot twists and surprise returns, and this was never more evident than with the McMahon elimination angle. Midway through the game's lifespan, I felt that the McMahon's position of power would go against my ideas for a general manager who only had control of one show. I wanted each show to be unique, with unique authority figures who would oversee each respective show without having control over the entirety of WWE. As a result, I sought to remove Vince and Stephanie from the picture, and while I could explain Vince's removal fairly easily, Stephanie's became a bit more complicated. The problem was that I kept changing my mind as to who should be responsible. I considered The Shield, Mark Henry, and more recently just Seth Rollins. I even had once thought of tying it back to Paul Heyman, but I wasn't interested in a McMahon-Heyman feud as the payoff. As for Seth Rollins, I'd hoped to bring an end to the plot hole by intertwining it with his feud with Triple H, but in the end, I didn't feel like it would fit my evolving image of the Seth Rollins character, and so I just buried that idea as well. Maybe the mystery will eventually be resolved, but for now, it's something I would like to stay forgotten. While the majority of my questionable choices are limited to the first 2 years of the series, the following 2 years haven't been all sunshine and rainbows either. WWE 2K15 has what I consider to be the biggest conceptual shift in my entire series. Up to that point, my series was a constant mix of both simulated and controlled matches, and as a result, I often had to change plans after a simulated match didn't quite end up as planned. I stuck with a variety, however, because people would always ask me to let the AI control the matches. For a while, I thought having to make changes on the spot would help me become a better storyteller, since I would have to adapt to a plethora of different scenarios. By the time WrestleMania season rolled around, however, I finally realized that this style of booking wasn't going to work. My initial plan was for CM Punk to win the Royal Rumble, and more than likely face John Cena for the WWE Championship at WrestleMania, thus concluding their long-standing rivalry. And while that may not have been necessarily the most exciting WrestleMania main event,
it would have made much more sense than what actually happened. Going into Elimination Chamber, I had chosen 3 superstars who I would have been okay with winning Raw's Elimination Chamber match, those being John Cena, Dolph Ziggler, and Jack Swagger. Unfortunately, things went wrong yet again, and The Rock wound up walking out with the title. At this point I decided,
If the people want to see a simulation, then I guess I just have to run with it. This led to a less than stellar blow-off match on Raw between Punk and Cena, since I already had plans for a World Heavyweight Championship triple threat match. And so, Punk went on to defeat The Rock and take back his WWE Championship, and while it would have been the outcome regardless of whether his opponent was Rock or Cena, it's the execution that made all the difference. This blunder was probably my best mistake, however, because it motivated me to take control of the entire presentation, which I believe has resulted in some amazing storylines and a much more consistent end product. Still, this doesn't change the fact that it was a garbage feud with a lackluster payoff, hence the reason why The Rock never got a rematch for the title and instead suffered an injury. Survivor Series is the biggest event in my universe mode to date, and a large part of the hype is centered around the 5-on-5 match. It's a tale of two best friends who have now become the worst of enemies after one betrayed the other. While each man is out to destroy the other, the feud is nonetheless establishing both competitors as rising stars and future world champions. It's a match that I've been building to since the WWE draft, so I'd like to pretend that both men are just now becoming main eventers. However, as is the case with everything else in this video, that's not entirely true. What if I told you that Dean Ambrose had already won the WWE title? In WWE 13, no less. That's right, at Capital Punishment, Dean Ambrose defeated CM Punk to win the WWE title. At the time, it was based solely on shock value alone, and I didn't have the foresight to realize that I was shooting myself in the foot by making the match in the first place. Even after he won it, I still treated Ambrose like a regular member of the Shield. His first title reign was incredibly rushed, and I didn't have the booking prowess to use it properly. The fact that Ambrose was in a 6-man tag match at SummerSlam instead of defending his title should be a clear indicator of this. In the end, Ambrose dropped the title after 84 days to John Cena at Night of Champions, which, if you're judging by the statistic alone, was an average title reign. In reality, however, Ambrose's title reign was incredibly lackluster, which is why I'd like to pretend it never happened. Thanks for watching. What do you think of this new series? I've had an idea for a behind-the-scenes show for quite a while, but I was never really sure how I should structure it. In the future, I might feature some fun facts, or maybe I could delve into the process of how I make a video or progress a storyline, as it evolves. I tried to create a broad title that wasn't limited to any one specific video type, and I think I've finally settled on one. I don't expect this to be a very regular series either, maybe like once a month or once every other month, depending on what I can think of talking about. Do you have any suggestions for future topics I could discuss? Is there anything you're interested in hearing about? Let me know what you think in the comments, and until next time, keep on YouTubing.